Welcome to Tone Talks. This is Antonio Moore coming to you from Tone Talks. Please support the channel. By supporting the channel, I mean hit the super chat, join the discussion. We're going to have a powerful discussion about the American Rescue Act, Biden's plan that was about the coronavirus but expands much larger than that. And I believe I'm going to talk about how it left black folks out. Please, before we start, support this channel by subscribing and press share. Press the bell to get a notification when this show goes on. I think for a lot of us, we got to start off with a very brief, synopsis from 101. We on 105 now, but just on 101 level. Understand that the middle black family, according to Brookings in 2018, made $41,000. That's multiple incomes or one income. $41,000. Understand that in Boston we had a liquid value of a liquid wealth level of $8, in LA $200, the rest of the nation somewhere between that. So we're talking about wealthless and largely low income people as a race, but a lot of us don't seem to understand that because we have what I call a comfort class. We have this class of black folks that will inherit $20,000 or $30,000, that will and don't know that's not enough, that have enough where somebody's going to help them with the down payment of their car, don't really understand ADOSness because of these privileges. We got the NAACP basically trying to tell the NFL about a Fox deal. Look, worry about the pandemic, medical help, coverages, income assistance, reparations. We don't need you doing that. You got people congratulating, and we'll get into it. We're going to talk about a number of subjects in this discussion, congratulating the first Native American or Indian, if you want to call it, Rep. Holland, for being confirmed to be the Interior Secretary. But they forget the fact that she actually co-sponsored a bill that basically, I can say, supports the way that Native American reservations have basically a common day Jim Crow system going on with the black people that were enslaved by their Indian ancestors. Let's talk. So inside of this bill is a lot of things going on. We talking about everything under the sun, scattered as it might be. And we not focused on how this will impact us and how it frames a discussion around how relatively reasonable a reparations demand is. This is the third round of checks going out. They told us checks can't go out this way when we talked about reparations before any of these checks. A lot of people from Vlad who told me it wasn't reasonable then said, I understand now. A lot of people from other people who didn't understand that reparative justice, reparations was always reasonable because it's a debt. And you can't make it unreasonable and make that argument for the government. It is not our job to tell the government that it's unreasonable to pay us what you owe us. But we made that argument, and now we sit here in a place where Native Americans will have $35 billion earmarked for them alone. We have so many things going on in America, and we're ignoring America. What I feel like needs to happen is a come to Jesus moment. A come to Jesus moment where we start to reconcile, why is it that we've been left out? Whose fault is it? How do I play a role? And what are we being left out of? So let's start off with what we're being left out of. Biden heads to Pennsylvania to tout the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan. So he's going to go around the country and deal with this plan. We know we do this by articles. We'll have phone calls at another point, but we do this by articles, and we're going to get into that discussion. President Biden is traveling to Pennsylvania on Tuesday to promote the American Rescue Plan, the beginning of a 6-state presidential swing to highlight the $1.9 trillion coronavirus relief legislation that was signed into law last week. I want everybody to understand the debt owed to ADOS Americans is somewhere around, you can say $15 to $20 trillion, if not more. The reality is we have a multi-trillion-dollar debt. Before these bills were signed, nobody understood that the willingness of the government to undergird people that were collapsing to keep them from collapsing. But we're so collapsed and we're so problematic that they don't want to acknowledge we're collapsed because you made us ADOS. Brought us over on ships, then made us build the country and gave us no tie-in to be able to invest and grow with that country. We need to talk. The president, Vice President Kamala Harris, and their spouses are touring the country this week to tout the measure, which includes popular provisions such as additional unemployment benefits, a child tax credit, and $1,400 direct checks. They promised us $2,000. We'll talk about that later. And we ended up at $1,400, and they're going to add in the $600 before. But one of the problems that's happening for ADOS people in particular is the way they set this up is it's built around income rather than wealth. So what do I mean? For so many of us, we went to college and we secured an income that might jump above that median that I said earlier, that $41,000. But when you take out the student loans, we push right back down to near that median. But they don't take out the student loans for us. When you add in the fact what the government is saying, listen to me. The cutoffs they're using, $75,000 and $85,000, they're saying that people that make above that, they're not saying it out loud, they're whispering it. They got parents, particularly white parents, because the middle black family makes 41, that will give them the wealth, and we're not going to step in for that white parent. The problem for ADOS that went to UCLA, that went to Howard, that went to Stanford, that went to these schools, and somehow secured this $90,000 salary, them and their spouse together make $180,000, is that not only are they paying student debt, which brings them all the way down, they have nobody to ask to give them that wealth that the government has built into the system. And at the same time, they're being asked to share that money with their siblings that make less than the 41. They never built this system for us. They didn't consider us when they built the hierarchy, because in this hierarchy is supposed to be a whole reality of when you reach this tier, it means you come from this tier. But ADOS were never included. The Native Americans make sure they got their piece, though. We'll talk about it. And let me say this. I don't want anybody to say that this is about attacking Native Americans. I'm dealing with the realities of what the government should do, what the government should require when Native Americans receive wealth. And if they are going to acknowledge them, they definitely should acknowledge ADOS. That's what I'm dealing with. The relief measure also includes $350 billion in aid to states and local governments. $14 billion for vaccine distribution and $130 billion to assist schools with reopening. Hope is here in real and tangible ways, the president said in remarks touting the American Rescue Plan on Monday. He promised to reach two giant goals over the next 10 days. The first is 100 million shots in the arm, talking about the vaccine, and the second is 100 million checks in people's pockets. But a lot of ADOS will be shut out of those checks because of a number of reasons. They said that the debt collectors can come after this check. They couldn't come after the first 600 in December, but they can come after this check. I'll talk about it later, but I found a study that said, I'm not saying this is absolute, but it said 35% of ADOS are in debt. What does it mean if you make it so they can take this money in debt? Can we talk? Please support the channel. I just want to bring you the discussion. They make it harder and harder for us to have these discussions. Please support the channel so I can keep bringing you these discussions. You can support here or tonetalks.org, or my Patreon is Tone Talks. We're going to get into this discussion, but let's talk, because I want to make sure you understand what's in this package. They got $16 billion for agriculture. Let's be specific. $59 billion for small businesses. They got $123 billion for COVID response. They got $176 billion in education. They got $56 billion in transportation. They got $105 billion in health. They got $143 billion in expanded health credits. They got $246 billion in expanded unemployment. They got $360 billion in government and $410 billion in stimulus checks. Understand, 10% of that, because I believe that's where the Native American help will come from. 10% of the $360 billion is for Native Americans alone. We got to get ours in the scraps of whatever's left behind when everybody else gets theirs in the general fund. If they're acknowledged, there's no reason that ADOS shouldn't be. But the failure is 30 years post civil rights to not have set up a full identity built around coming out of slavery in America, not just being a slave, coming from the wealth that the slaves created in America and the privilege that should come from that. They got ID cards. We'll get into in a second that the people that the Native Americans enslaved get a 0.0. You know what grade that is? That's an F in class on the front of their card, meaning you don't get no privileges. You can vote, but you don't get no privileges. You don't get no medical care, no benefits. You're not part of this 35 billion, but you was a slave to us. But then we don't have an identity called ADOS. We just black, just like Daniel Kaluuya. We black, just like Cynthia Erivo. None of it makes any sense, and your family can't eat blackness. Your family can't eat blackness. I'm just telling you, because they built the whole system. I keep coming back to it with the cutoffs. Because when you make a little more, what happens now is ADOS, you get kicked a whole lot more down. See, what's happening is that ADOS are being locked out on both sides. We're being locked out with them not including the minimum wages. So our sisters and brothers are helped. So that in some cases we are helped. And then we're being locked out at the top because if we break out to 85 or 95, all of a sudden, all of the things, the lineage, the privileges that are supposed to go with that income, we don't have. But then at the same time, we don't get none of the benefits of the stuff we need, a stimulus check, everything else. I want everybody to understand, you make 75, you take home $2,000 every 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks, you take home about $2,000. Understand that you might spend 1,000 of that 4,000 take home, a quarter of it on your student loans. So you got 3 left. You give $500 to family. So you back at 2,500. So you making the 40 again. You back at the 40, 47, 46. You just don't know how to count it because they never built this for you. They didn't think about you in this $1.9 trillion package. We tried to tell you this. We tried to include you in the discussion and we got cultural conventions. We tried to include you in the discussion and we got black immigrants telling us about xenophobia. We tried to include you in the discussion and we got anti-reparations discussion from Pan-Africanists. I'll tell you how we did it at the highest level in a second. No big donors. ADOS put you at the highest level for you to be in this bill, and you basically did not do the work with us. Let's talk. What's in the Congress's $1.9 trillion COVID bill? Let's get more specific than just the chart I showed a second ago. I want to make sure we understand this bill and this everything else that's going on. Everybody else is talking about nothing. Condolences to the Asian people that were shot down. I understand the NFL got a contract. I see everything going on with the congratulations to Holland. I don't believe she deserves the congratulations in my view, given what she sponsored. But you see everybody doing that. ADOS is doing the $1.9 trillion package. And we doing reparations. I want to see it today. Here's a rundown of the American Rescue Plan. Number one, the unemployment benefits. The package extends the existing $300 weekly unemployment benefits through September 6th, as well as provides a tax break on $10,000 in unemployment. No matter, they don't count how much you give the family. They don't count how much you get the student loans. They say you got some family that can help you out. You don't really need this. They ain't just saying that you make enough income. It's not enough income to say that. They're saying that should trigger you into another level. They're making a whole package for white folk. See, that's the way white folk are tiered. I've shown you before. Understand, we're not tiered that way. So they didn't even think about black folks that went to college. They just said, forget them. It's not enough of them to count, and they don't care about themselves no way because they be doing that people of color politics anyway. I'm just telling you that ADOS tries to make it clear for you that if you don't make yourself count, then who gonna make yourself count? Let's see it. Stimulus bill. The bill would send $1,400 stimulus checks on top of the $600 payments issued through the stimulus bill passed in December. Roughly $400. They lowered the amount of what you qualify for. Individuals earning $75,000 per year and couples earning $150,000. That's how you get we receive the full $1,400 per person benefit. However, the benefit would disappear for individuals earning more than $80,000 annually and couples earning more than $160,000. So you can be white, sitting there making $56,000, but you inherited $1 million house. You get the stimulus. You can be white. You didn't make no money last year, but you lived on loans from the house or gifts from your grandmama. You get the stimulus. See, they didn't build this for us. And we didn't demand that they build us our own avenue, our own space, similar to the Native Americans. What ADOS was telling you before the pandemic is that eventually something's going to happen and trigger the need for you to have your own. We told you how to get your own. I'll get into it in a second how we did it. So a lot of other people was getting in the way. They told us about cultural conventions. They told us about all kind of other things that was going, wearing kente cloth and kneeling. They told us about Colin Kaepernick, and they told us about a lot of stuff. There's a lot of people tweeting about Shaun King. I don't need look, I understand we want to talk about that, and it's a necessary discussion. But after we talk about how your family gonna eat tonight, after child tax credit, under the legislation, most Americans will receive $3,000 a year for each child aged 6 to 17 and $3,600 for each child under 6. This is the big part they keep touting, and they say it's this gift and it's going to be this great thing because it's a child minimum, and it's nice how they're giving all the children's money out. But what about ADOS that don't have no children? Hold on. What about ADOS where that's not enough? Let me explain. They was already giving you $2,000. So if you got one child, they only giving you $1,000 more. If you got if the child is, I believe the age is 6 to 17. There's a reason they use 6 to 17. I'll explain in a second. But if you got a child under 6, they're going to give you $1,600 more. But they're making it seem like they're giving you the full 36 or the full 3. Okay, hold on. Why is it that the cutoff is 6? I want to know. Maybe somebody in the chat can help me. Please support the chat channel. The cutoff is 6 is because the presumption is that the most expensive years are 0 to 6 because they don't have no public school. You got to pay for a lot of things, diapers, everything else. Well, 6, you go to public school, and they there 5 days a week from 7 to 3:30, even later sometimes if they got after school, and then they come home and do it again. The government would get estates about $1,000 a month for each kid, $12,000 a year. And inside of that, who cares the amount? You got to give them all you can in them hours. You got to make sure you have the services and everything in them hours. So it's like a voucher almost, like, in a way. But they changed everything after the pandemic. After the pandemic, they made you keep your kid at home when you might be able to afford the internet at $150, $200 because of monopolies and everything else. They told you about hybrid, but then ended the school day at 2 o'clock and you still at work and your kid is only 9 years old. How they gonna get home? They got rid of the buses because of the pandemic. So they giving you a little bit of scraps, but they changed the whole architect. So in effect, they're not giving you enough to actually deal with the new cost of having children. We told you in 2015 and 2016 that this was coming. We told you about the programming balls that was coming and everything else, and the schools at home and how they had the commercials on TV. They accelerated it, and we're here now. And now they're going to give you a token of money through the child tax credit that you already, in the bulk of it, already had, and tell you it's a gift as ADOS who are owed reparations. Now, also, for those people with kids that are 6 to 17, somehow now they're going to tell you that those kids in that bracket are going to be judged based on the old math, where they went to public school all day. We're in a new math, though. Why are kids 6 to 17 being treated any differently than kids 0 to 6? All them kids cost a lot now. They always did, but especially now. Can somebody just preach with me? Come on. I'm just telling you. Everybody should get 36. Y'all should be mad if you got like a 9-year-old or a 12-year-old. They told you to get a new computer. They told you to get the internet. They told you make sure that you got the internet all day. Hold on, you got 2 kids, so you got to get double internet. Then they told you that the computer screen cracked, so you got to get a new computer. They told you the computer you got was too slow, so you got to get the one with a better processor. Then you had to have somebody come out because the internet wasn't working right. They charged you a fee to have somebody come out, but they gave you $3,000. See, they playing games right now. They moving the ball. Number 4, aid to state and local governments. The package designates $350 billion for states, cities, tribal governments, and U.S. territories. So $30 1 to 35 billion of that is just going to Indians. They getting 10% for themselves. Inside of that, I'll get in a second, they're being allowed to build their own cable lines, their own broadband. See, I talked about this when I brought in Byron Allen. Black folks used to own the cable lines, but they wouldn't let us set up our own companies, ADOS blacks. If that was allowed, we would own our own messaging, and we would be billionaires and like up there with Bezos off of just that. Not to mention the farming and everything else we'll get into. They're going to allow Native Americans to do that. While Native Americans have Jim Crow laws, the money shouldn't be allowed as long as they got Jim Crow going on. And so essentially where we're at now is that we are being ignored and we're not saying anything. And we're allowing our organizations from the NAACP to the Urban League. We're allowing our Congressional Black Caucus to congratulate people that don't need no congratulations from us, given their co-sponsorship history. We're allowing ourselves to be caught up in the festivity of what they call it. Can somebody tell me what the ABC special is? Shades of America, the thing they got going on. I don't want to hear about what ABC got going on. We digging deeper. They got the little special with Common and John Legend running around talking about blackness in America. We gonna get into some blackness in America. Somebody gonna tell me what that's called. Number 5, pandemic response. Tens of billions of dollars will fund coronavirus testing and contact tracing, increasing the size of the public health workforce and funding vaccine distribution and supply chains. Housing assistance. The bill sets aside more than $20 billion in emergency rental assistance and other relief for homeless. School support. They talking about school support. The bill sets aside $130 billion to help K-12 schools reopen. They got the schools reopening, then they closing. They got hybrid in some places. They got no school in others. They're going to give school for K-2, but then they're not going to give school for junior high and high school. They got high schoolers that ain't been in school for 2 years, and they think they're going to just throw them back in school and everything going to be all right. Do we all understand the consequence of this moment? The consequence of the politics we adopted prior to this moment. There was no engine similar to ADOS since civil rights. There was no engine for reparations like ADOS since Cali House. And now what we're trying to do is ignite you to understand what comes next. Aid for multiple employer pension plans. The bill includes it. See, everybody didn't see this. $86 billion bailout for failing pensions. So the boomers took care of themselves in here. And what they're talking about is, I believe, private pensions. So these private pensions didn't really invest right and everything else, and they should fall apart. Well, we got to pay our student loans, and the pensions didn't invest right. So why should they get undergirded? Then we get cut out from the stimulus when we got working age. When we're working age, we got children, we got student loans. I'm telling you, they didn't think about you in this. Thought about a lot of people. New provisions. The bill provides $510 million for FEMA emergency shelters. What was not included was the minimum wage. We're going to talk about this discussion and have this conversation about this bill. Calling is 310-388-3499. Please call in. We're going to start digging into some nuances now that we've laid out the framework for what's in the bill. You can always go back and read the articles that I've actually posted. But before I get into that, what I want to do is explain to you how we as American descendants of slavery, ADOS101.com, ADOS HQ, Yvette Carnell Breaking Brown, Antonio Mortone Talks, how we set things up for you to be better than this, more than this in this bill. See, I want you to look at this. This is congress.gov. Some of y'all might not have seen that before. I want you to focus in on the arrow. The arrow tells you the sponsor who sponsored this bill. The name on that is important because it says John Yarmouth. You might remember that name, John Yarmouth. So the sponsor of this bill is John Yarmouth along with others. He co-sponsored this bill. But he was the head of the budgets. I told you that a year ago, actually a year and a half ago. And where was he at? He was at the ADOS conference. So John Yarmouth, who did this bill, was at the ADOS conference on the stage with Yvette Carnell and me. We recently, even in the last 6 months, did a Skype with him for HBCU Simmons College. Shout out Kevin Cosby, President Kevin Cosby. And in that moment, what we were trying to do is galvanize an energy that acknowledged that ADOS are separate from just being black in America, that ADOS are owed a debt. And what we got was roadblocks. We got cultural conventions. We got xenophobics talk. We got talk about capitalism and black banking. We got all kind of talk. We got crypto talk. We got talk that we're too democratic. Then we got talk that we're too Republican. But what we didn't get was the truth of the framing of what we had done with no donors. See, John Yarmuth basically was saying, and I'll read it to you in a second, the man who sponsored this bill or co-sponsored it, give me the voice. Let me read it to you. He said, give me the voice. And we said, hey, y'all, we need this voice, and you can be like the Native Americans in this bill. Y'all don't do nothing, Tone. We put the man that makes the decisions, or he's in the room, on the table, in the room, and we got Sheila Jackson, HR 40, and we got all kind of little side groups that came up. We got all kind of nonsense. That is what a convention, that is what a gathering does. That is why the ADOS conference was so powerful. It was not just gamesmanship about a history of being Pan-African. It was not just melanin talk. It was pure politics. I want to talk. But you don't got to take my word for it. This is the article that came out on, I believe it was like one of USA Today. They have like a sub newspaper. And what they said is ADOS organizers put forth a black agenda which includes more federal lending to black-owned businesses, substantial increasing funding for historically black colleges and universities, and direct payments to descendants of slaves. Talking about American descendants of slavery in that sense. And they're getting all that from ADOS 101. Nothing had ever been like that on the internet. Everybody just talking, nobody put forth the agenda. We said, here's the agenda, and we gave it to who? John Yarmuth, who gave you the $1.9 trillion bill. You know what he says to us? On stage. So I want you to understand this, because you always say, well, how come we wasn't included? It's because of you, the person listening to this right now. You didn't do enough for your family to eat. You didn't do what he's telling you in this sentence. I want you to hear it. Until we convince a significant portion of the country that it is justified and make them comfortable with it and make them understand that just because they didn't own any slaves themselves doesn't mean you're innocent of the institutionalized discrimination that has led to the disparity in wealth. It doesn't matter how the money is processed, because it won't be coming. We got the guy that sponsored the $1.9 trillion package to say that at our conference and told you, let's make our voices known. And we got cultural conferences and NFL contract issues and HR 40 hearings about Pan-Africanism. We got nonsense. There's levels to this. I want everybody to understand that I'm talking slow, but saying a whole bunch. I'm slowing it down because I can't tell you that it's impossible without showing you how it is possible. When you look at the Native Americans, I want you to understand that they have carved out $31 billion just for Native Americans. They both acknowledge them and give them their own wealth to do it as they please. In the middle of a moment where they have Jim Crow laws or some sort of them going on reservations. They got actual IDs where black people that descend from slaves that were traded as slaves by Native Americans are not considered Native American because they don't got Indian blood, but they built this thing too. But they get the money anyway. So I'm looking at the discussion and I'm having it, and I gotta say the thing that got pushed around is, because they gotta say black people got something, is the farmers, the black farmers. They said the black farmers got $5 billion in this, more than ever before. They got $5 billion in this bill. But what they didn't say is go read the bill. So when you read the actual bill, the section that's for grants is for everybody. But they mix it in the stories. What the $5 billion is for socially disadvantaged farmers. But then they say it's for black people. Socially disadvantaged has been as broad as, including women, while they say they omit them in this bill currently, There's no, not to say that there can't be litigation to include them when they've been included as socially disadvantaged prior. But it also includes who? Native Americans. It includes Native Americans. So they get a piece of the little debt relief, $5 billion, and they get their own $31 billion. Hold on. But in addition, if you look at the raw numbers of black producers, there's about 45,000. There are 58,000 Indian producers. Now, those are not owners, possibly. Those are just producers. But understand, they might get more out of the section that they're pushing as reparations for ADOS than ADOS do, and also get $31 billion, and had us as slaves. I don't understand how we got here where people don't understand basic politics nor how to read bills, but we are here. I don't understand how we got here where Congressional Black Caucus has abdicated responsibility to their black constituents, but we are here. I don't understand how we're at a place where, and I'm not guessing, let me read this to you because I've said it a number of times. I've read this before, but it's important to get this into the dialogue. I'm going to read it. In 1860, about 30 years after their removal to Indian territories from their respective homes in the Southeast, Cherokee Nation citizens owned 2,511 slaves, 15% of their population. Choctaw citizens owned 2,349 slaves, 14% of their population. And Creek citizens owned 1,532 slaves, 10% of their population. Chickasaw citizens owned 975 slaves, which amount to 18% of their population, a proportion equivalent to that of white slave owners in Tennessee. What's the difference? So these groups had large holdings of slaves, traded on that, made wealth on that, and now have shut those slaves off and created a second-tier citizenship that mirrors the 1960s in America, and they're getting their own wealth with no ties to fix that. I need you to see how we're having this discussion. 310-388-3499. Let me take the first caller tonight. Caller, what's your name? Where are you calling from?
What's going on, Tone? This is Quinlan, calling from Arkansas.
What's your take on everything? Because we're going to get into this Native American $31 billion right after you give your first take.
Yes, sir, man. I'm a little nervous. I'm so happy to be on the phone with you. Let me try to be like Tone and get to the point. I think I asked earlier, what's the deal with basically ADOS having to, what are all these distractions? You know, I feel like I'm young and I'm getting all this knowledge, and I'm like, man, what has been the issue with us getting this knowledge, being focused, staying on topic, pushing our agenda forward? And I think it's just like this wealth. It's almost ironic, like this wealth of distraction. It's just these people over here, and they want to take what seems like ADOS, what everyone knows ADOS is owed. I feel like people know ADOS is, even if they don't know the language, I feel like they understand that there's been wrong done. But at the same time, I feel like there's so many groups got their hands out, and they're not focused at all on ADOS. So I asked earlier, and it's just still kind of bumping around in my head, like, why can't we be focused on just ADOS? Why is it this group and that group?
So
yeah, like I said,
was that a question, or you just if it's a question, I'll give you my answer. But if you just,
I'm supposed to. I don't even know. I'm supposed to be sharing stuff. But yeah, that's legitimately my biggest question. I don't.
Well, let me say this. There's a couple of things. I think it's a plethora of things. But if I had to drill down, I start with the decadent veil. Black celebrity is far too loud. You see John Legend and Common. I don't know what expertise they have to be framing blackness in America. What PhD, what economics background, what framing. And I don't care if they bring other people. I don't want you making it. We listen to people that are actresses and actors and singers far too much. That's good. Support. But support. That's the first thing. The second thing is, I noticed on the YouTube space, y'all got too many people that are not advanced enough in terms of academics. I don't care what everybody feel. They're not advanced enough to be telling you about information the way they do. Now, I'm not saying they can't tell you about plumbing if they really get into plumbing, but you allow them to just talk without any kind of real understanding of what they're talking about. And then what happens is people actually get to a point where they don't know how to create new ideas, So they take ideas that are already created, say by myself and Yvette, and they fracture it and make it real, real erratic and sometimes crazed. The next thing is we allow boomers to live too comfortable. What do I mean? We allow them to tell us that we responsible for student loans. Understand, it is one of the greatest failures in 100 years that ADOS are not going to college for free. Put reparations to the side for a second. There is no way that as an ADOS you should get to UCLA, Stanford, Howard, and it's not totally free. The fact that we've digested that while we support them having their pensions, when the pensions are not solvent, they're not making money. We'll argue against that collapsing and then allow student loans to be packed on top of us. So we don't advocate for our own generation enough. I call this the reparation generation because we care about our babies because we're going to make sure that they don't pay college debt when we still got college debt. And we also going to make sure that our parents' retirement is okay when we don't have retirement. So that's just three things. Now, the last thing is probably also on top is we've allowed intersectionalism to eat this race like whole. I believe in social dominance theory, which says that the out group, male group, which is what we see when we look at incarceration, unemployment, is the most disenfranchised group. Intersectionalism is, there's no data to support it. Like in terms of when you look, and I did the show before, when you look at abuse, black women and white women abuse their men twice as much when you add in spitting, punching, pushing. When you look at incarceration, there's like 500,000 black men in jail. There's about 20,000 black women. I don't want those women in jail, but we just erase the sexism of all that going on. When you look at wages, when you add in the prisoners, we make 51 cents on the dollar. So all four of those categories, if I smacked it down, have created a craze within this race and a scatteredness. And I think that you add in benign neglect and black capitalism, Boyce Watkins, cryptocurrency, so everybody will say Bitcoin is doing well. What about BitConnect? What about all the other coins? What about all the other losses, the classes? Don't tell me about Bitcoin and leave out BitConnect. Any last thing you want to say to the audience?
No, sir. No, sir. Like I said, I'm happy to be here with your family. I'm happy to get this knowledge, and I'm ready to ready to lift that veil wherever I can.
Thanks so much, man. Woo, we in it tonight. We in it. Thanks so much. I love when the young men call in because, and the young women as well. I just think that it's time to get honest. 31 billion represents a massive opportunity for the IndianCountryToday.com. Hold on one second. Let's let this plane go by because I don't want to miss nothing today. We are having a conversation. The queue is full. 31 billion represents a massive opportunity. Indian Country Today. The new law includes $31 billion plus for tribal nations, representing the single largest investment in the tribal nations in U.S. history. It's what Senate Indian Affairs Chairman Brian Schatz of Democrat of Hawaii called a down payment on the federal government's trust responsibility to Native communities and will empower American Indians, Alaska Natives, and Native Hawaiians to tackle COVID-19's impact on their communities. I would argue it's basically an early form of reparations. I told when Marianne Williamson was on the stage at the conference, my argument to her was she kept saying $200 billion. Yeah, that's a down payment for ADOS. And then we moved to talking about reparations. You get that as an in-kind gift. They just gave like a form of reparations. And understand, again, Indians were 15 to 20, the big five tribes were 15 to 20% slave owners. And so they just got a big old chunk of money. They're going to start their own cable companies and subsidize their farms and get their COVID going. And they're going to cut out the ADOS people that they had as slaves. Because there's nothing in this bill to actually force them to do better by getting rid of their Jim Crow system. In addition to the $20 billion that will directly go to tribes, there's also $6 billion that will bolster Indian health systems, including money for COVID-19 vaccines. We'll read an article in a second where they shut out the freedmen from getting vaccines. Now, you can feel how you feel about vaccines. That's a real personal decision whether you take it or not. But when you choose as an ADOS to want a Pfizer or Moderna, I am the first to advocate you have every right to, particularly when you come to the clinic and you are somebody that was basically a slave to the Native Americans. You should not be shut out because your card says 0.0. We'll get into it. Early on in the pandemic, tribes sent the signal that language preservation was critical. Some of the early vaccines, for example, were reserved for elders who spoke a language. So they got specific. They say if you extra Indian, that's not xenophobic. If you have a language on top of being old, you get it first. But if you black and you was a slave under us, you don't get it at all. And they trying to do a PR campaign now, y'all. They got the PR coming out in Oklahoma because the story broke 3 days ago that they left out the freedmen on purpose with the vaccine, and they saying it's available to everybody now. Months later, people done died and everything. Tilson, who has managed the community development projects nationally as well as the Thunder Valley Community Development Corporation, sees another opportunity to improve digital access to Native communities. I think the broadband thing is huge, he said. Huge. I think it's around 1 billion out of the 31.2 that's dedicated for broadband. They don't have a dollar dedicated for ADOS. They don't even mention ADOS in this bill. But they got $1 billion just to do their own internet. In addition to the money, perhaps the most significant shift is the way Congress is looking at tribes going forward. Frederick said the Relief Act is a narrative issue because Congress is finally recognizing tribes and their importance to the American fabric. So now they have a high-ranking official that was confirmed through Holland. Now they also have a recognition of how important they are in the fabric, while ADOS are left out. The Congressional Black Caucus is doing Pan-African articles, though. Maybe we can eat that. They talking about $31 billion here, Pan-Africanist articles from the Congressional Black Caucus about somewhere else. They telling us about farming bills when the farming money is a debt relief and it's for everybody that's socially disadvantaged. This ain't for everybody that's socially disadvantaged. In fact, this ain't even for the slaves that the Native Americans had. It's just for them, and they're going to make sure that the elders that speak the language get it first, whatever's out there. Senate passes largest investment in the Native American programs in history, more than $31 billion heading to Native communities. Let's break this money down. $20 billion for tribal governments to combat COVID-19 and stabilize tribal community safety net programs. $6 billion for Native health systems. $1.2 billion for HUD, tribal and Native Hawaiian housing programs, $1.1 billion for Native education programs, including the Bureau of Indian Education Schools, tribal education agencies, $1 billion for Native families, $900 million for the Bureau of Indian Affairs program, $600 million for communities' critical economic and infrastructure investments, $20 million to mitigate the impact of COVID-19 on Native languages, $19 million for Native communities to combat domestic violence. Not a dollar for ADOS. Let's take another caller. Caller, what's your name? Where you calling from?
Hey, Tom, this is Jabari out of New York City.
You want to speak on this Native American section of the bill?
Not really, but I guess I could say that it's crazy that they're getting specific carve outs and we don't. Not to mention they're denying Freeman to this day. So that's all I was gonna say.
Okay.
But I was just calling to ask about. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just calling because you said about the stimulus. Like I'm seeing memes going around about like how if you got the 1,400 and all that, that's cute and all, but that 1,400 is not real money.
I agree.
Because like for example, I live in New York. Rent is basically 1,400, and I quote unquote take a decent job. I'm 28. I have no kids, no student loans, none of that. But basically, half my check goes to rent.
Yeah. The reality is like to have this money go no strings attached based on income, and then tell us that we can't get a debt paid in reparations based on lineage. It's a joke. And Black America hasn't said enough about how much of a joke it is. If anything, this should signal that they have the ability to write the checks. They just don't want to write your check. And I think people don't understand. Is the first part is that it was supposed to be 2,000. That's what they campaigned on. That's how they got the black senator and Warnock and Ossoff in Georgia. They campaigned on 2,000. It's going to be out in a week. Then we're 3 months in. That's when they finally got it out. And then black folks that make more than 75 or 80 are cut out. And it's like, how? Like, that's not a lot of money. Why is the threshold so low? Why doesn't it look at wealth instead of income? Why doesn't it look at wealth and income? Because this is stabilizing white folks. Any last thing you want to say to the audience?
No, that's all it. And, just gotta keep pushing. Take care.
Thanks so much, bro. Let's take another caller. Caller, what's your name? Where you calling from?
Yeah, what's going on, son? I'm calling out of Philly.
Hey, what's up, man? Let me.
Hello?
Yeah, are you here? You here? Look, I got a.
All right. So,
hold on. Let me share something with you. I got two different images here, and I'm gonna put them up on the screen, and then I want you to speak to them because I'm gonna frame them for you. This first thing is a congratulation for Rep. Deb Haaland from both the CBC and the NAACP Legal Fund on being confirmed as the Interior Department Secretary. Okay, that's the first image. The second image, I want to read it to you. It says Deb Haaland co-sponsored a bill that removed protections for black descendants of enslaved people owned by members of the 5 slaveholding tribes. We went through it before. Deb Haaland co-sponsored the bill. Listening in December 19, Representative Haaland co-sponsored a bipartisan bill to reauthorize the Native American Housing Assistance and Self-Determination Act through 2024 that removed protections for freedmen of the 5 tribes that had previously been in other bills, reauthorizing the funds. So it's basically reaffirming or stabilizing Jim Crow in the reservations. And I think they should at least, really, we should have our own money as well. And as should they, if they have it. It's not for us to argue for that. But I know for a fact that there should be a total requirement that they can't omit the freedmen, and they shouldn't have this tiered citizenship to get the money. What's your take on everything?
It's a continuation of the Native American policy towards ADOS that has always been in existence. Like, that's just, they never acknowledged us. They never wanted us to fully share in any benefits that they may have gotten politically. They never included us. So the fact that they're trying to formally disclude us shouldn't be like a thing, man. And I think that, again, man, we live ADOS. We live in such a bizarro form of America that we don't know what's going on. And that's why we can't get traction on reparations. Because we don't know that your parents are supposed to help you with the down payment on your house. You're not supposed to help your parents
let's frame that for a second. The reason that they didn't have to help you before is because the house was cheaper and you didn't have student loans. What happened is that America started giving less wealth to the bottom 90. What happens then is your parents matter more. Over the course of one lifetime, going from 1970 to 2020, that transition happened due to lack of politics. We moved from FDR, we moved from in the New Deal, which we were shut out of, and Lyndon Johnson and the Civil Rights Movement, to Reagan and deregulation. We move into a world where you have black boomers allowing for their children to be, and it's not just black boomers, white boomers as well, but they pay much more often, to be strangled by student debt. You allow for housing to jump. You allow for immigration policy that is not in the best interest of your own children. You allow for a number of things that you don't stand up to. So now when we get here, this world we live in today requires your parents to convey upon you an advantage that their world didn't. Because they didn't have to do that. They could work their way out, to be simple. Let me read one thing to you about what you just said. This is an article, Oklahoma Tribes, Black Freedmen Seek Ally in Holland. A spokesperson for the Creek Nation said many citizens feel that blood lineage as a condition of tribal membership is essential to protecting their identity. He's justifying this Jim Crow system while ignoring the reality that you had slaves. If you have slaves, it don't matter if you want to leave them out. They are not only, so basically this is an anti-reparation setup. They owe reparations as well to those freedmen. So going back to it, reading it again, a spokesperson for the Creek Nation said many citizens feel that blood lineage as a condition of tribal membership is essential to protecting their identity. This requirement for an ancestry connection exists across the nation's 574 federally recognized tribes, with each having different rules governing membership. But he acknowledged the injustices some Creeks inflicted on people they enslaved and left the door open for reform. So they give them the right to vote, but they ain't giving them the real stuff, the health care and the housing, and they cutting them out of housing. It's wild, ain't it?
Well, I'm going to tell you this, Tony. Okay, they're going to be able to have their own broadband, right?
Yep.
They're going to be able to have their own cable, right?
Mm-hmm. Companies.
They have money to propagate their native language, right?
Yep.
They can put programs in place to ensure that, the future generations of younger people will be able to speak that native tongue, right?
Come on.
So, just like you spoke before, where they said that not only were the elders of the community got the first vaccine, it was the elders that spoke the native language.
Mm-hmm.
So now, moving forward, that they have the ability to ensure that, the tribes and the people there have the ability to learn and speak that native language. That's the next step. The next step is going to be, it's not just blood lineage, because anybody might have a drop of Native American blood. It's the cultural tie as well, being the language. Just any other cultural identifier that ADOS gets crucified for trying to claim us as an individual, as a collective.
Well, they basically saying they exist and we don't, and I don't understand how this was allowed to sit. I mean, I think that what we've done is revolutionize the way that we see lineage and blackness in America in an obvious way. But it's just weird the response that we get versus this. And again, they 20%, 15% slave ownership, not a random slave owner.
So again, moving forward, it's not just going to be that blood tie. It's going to be, can you speak the language? They know we're not going to have access to learn that language, so that it's going to be another way to disclude ADOS that do have that Native American blood lineage.
Anything you want to say about the bill overall before I let you go? Because I got a queue. I'm going to get everybody in here.
No, again, like I said, man, it's just a continuation of what's been, it's an attempt to formalize something that's been informal forever.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Yeah. I always appreciate your calls, bro. Look, man.
Yes, sir, and I had a babysitter tonight, so we good.
Thank you, man. So look, man, I got another article before I leave the Native American section. A Native American tribe in Oklahoma denied black citizens COVID-19 vaccines and financial relief. So this article comes out 3 days ago. Then today they talk about how they're going to give the Oklahoma tribe to everybody. That's their response because they know this is blowing up. See, they've been flying under the radar because they didn't have this representation in the actual administrations. So now it comes out like that's part of actually you now being confirmed and everything else. Is your stuff set up in a way where it's equitable and fair? In addition, we're going beyond fairness. If you had slaves, you can't then omit them because they don't have your blood. You had slaves, you owe those slaves access. And I'm talking about the freedmen. We're stuck in a system that doesn't care about us. Black citizens of the Seminole Nation said, it's my belief that the $31 billion given to the Native Americans should have been contingent on them not having a Jim Crow type system. That is the bare minimum. They should have had no contingencies. Those people should not have an ID card that effectively, I'll read it to you in a second, says 0.0, meaning you don't get services. Let me read it to you. By the time the Seminole Nation of Oklahoma began distributing vaccines to tribal citizens, Letta Osborne Sampson had already witnessed nearly 24 members of her extended family die of COVID-19. She was relieved vaccine doses had finally arrived to protect those who remained. But when she showed up at the Indian Health Services Clinic in Wawoka, the capital of the Seminole Nation, staffers refused to give her a shot. They told her that she wasn't eligible because her tribal ID card identifies her as a freedman, a Seminole citizen who is a descendant of enslaved black people. When she demanded answers, the staffers called over a tribal police officer. They called over the police on her for wanting a vaccine shot. Understand she's not able to get it because she's ADOS. Understand she's ADOS because she was a slave, not by just white people who might have sold her to them, but also by the Native Americans themselves that run the clinic. Or their descendants. It's a terrible day to find out that your own people will let you die, said Osborne Sampson, who sits on the Seminole Nations Tribal Council. While tribal leaders and the Indian Health Services have been hailed for successfully rolling out COVID vaccines across the country, Osborne Sampson is one of six freedmen who told BuzzFeed News that the Seminole Nation has denied them vaccines, health services, and COVID-19 financial relief based on the ancestry listed on their tribal ID card. Freedmen make up 1/8 of the Seminole Nation's nearly 20,000 citizens are counted in the tribal census, which the federal government used to allocate over $16 million in CARES Act to the tribe. So they allocate money based on these people. And then when it comes time to disperse the money, they don't get any of the money. And again, they were descendants of the slaves that the Indians had. The distinction between a Native American and a freedman relies on what freedmen call a racist and outdated ideology of citizenship by blood. All Seminole freedmen receive tribal ID cards that read freedman citizen 000/0 Indian blood on the front and voting benefits only on the back. Other tribal citizens receive cards that list their blood quantum, their fraction of Indian blood, with no restrictions. I need to talk, man. Let me see if I can get another caller in here and see what they say. Caller, what's your name? Where you calling from?
Hey, what's going on, Tone? This is Troy calling from Dallas.
Troy, what you think about everything I just said? I mean, to me, it's just the wildest thing.
Well, I mean, I think it's just what like the last caller said, they've just done that all throughout history, always trying to redefine who exactly is a native. You know, early on in America, when they were fighting with the darker skinned Indians that were in the Deep South, or what's considered today the Deep South, you know, especially in the early Virginia slave codes, they had to reclassify a lot of those Indians that they followed as Negroes, so that the way they could have an excuse to conquer them and throw them into slavery. And just like they're, you know, same thing with Meghan Markle and all these other countries, there's always an attempt to whiteify history and put who they would rather have, the natives, and get rid of the people that they don't feel like dealing with. And we're just witnessing that in the modern day context.
You want to?
They don't want to deal with ADOS. They rather deal with the blacks from Africa or another country. And I just feel like even with the media, the movies, and even with this here you're talking about, there's always an attempt to replace us with a more somebody that's easier to deal with and someone who will appreciate a gift better than us, because we know what we've gone through. And we know that when you're giving us a 6 for a 9, we want what we're owed. So they want to give somebody who looks like us that'll take that 6.
Look, you know, I got a couple callers. I want to give you the floor. What did you actually want to ask or talk about briefly?
Okay. Well, I had 3 points. One point was regarding, you know, about the Indian citizenship. I'm not sure if you've seen the video by the Jane Elliott, who.
Can I ask you a favor? Can I ask you a favor? Just so,
yes,
just so we
yes,
have,
sir.
try to keep it to pick the 2 best points and just bring it so we can get other callers a chance as well. Whichever 2 you want.
Well, I just wanted to say, yeah, I wrote these down, so I'll just hit my points real quick. Number one, I just felt like this is going to help push more people that are always trying to identify blacks as Indians. This is going to be another, you know, way for them to say, hey, we need to go that route to get our reparations, because they're recognizing them, and they're still not recognizing us even after the moment we had last year in June. I also wanted to talk about the stimulus. If anybody that's got an app right now, as far as any type of banking app, there's all these pushes and notifications to say, hey, invest your stimulus in Bitcoin, invest your stimulus in crypto here or whatever. And, you know, I just feel like this stimulus, like you were saying earlier, this is another thing that they're giving to us to give back to them that's going to increase their business. You know, they're already saying that, Bitcoin was created as a way to address inflation. So, you know, that's basically like a black hole for where all the stimulus dollars that people are creating. They're making people think, hey, put your money into Bitcoin, put $100 into Bitcoin, and you're going to get rich. You know, if Bitcoin is around $50,000, it's going to take your Bitcoin being worth $100,000 for your $100 to turn into $200. So people should realize that even if you're throwing $1,400 into that thing, it's like throwing a glass of water out into the sea.
Let me say one more thing. If your refrigerator empty, you ain't got no business putting no money in no Bitcoin. Put some food in your refrigerator so your belly be full. It's just a straight up truth.
Yeah.
That's why they're giving you
They're
this little,
getting people
this little
used
money.
to this. They already had debt-based money. Now they're getting everybody used to this attention-based money, and that's why they're talking about reparations now. Because of course they'll talk about it when the money is worthless. I mean, if there's around 15 million black people in America, it shouldn't hurt to give $1 million to each person, and that can be a starting point because they spend billions of dollars daily on nothing.
Yeah, man. Hey, man.
Absolutely.
Let me say this, man. You were a very very good caller. I'm gonna let you go because I want to get to some other people. Thank you so much for calling. There's 36 million ADOS and about 46 million. That's what we're looking at with the new census that's coming. Blacks overall. Those ADOS people descend from American slavery and are owed a whole lot of money. And so, please support this channel, Patreon Tone Talks. I want to transition the discussion. I want to get into some of the procedural elements of the bill, some of the things we're seeing, how the money is dispersed, how they're using the IRS, and the IRS is in a whole cluster of mess right now, and how that doesn't make any sense. The new stimulus payments aren't protected from debt collectors. 34% of blacks, by one study I found, I talked about it earlier, were in debt. So, but the new stimulus versus the one in December is allowed for debt collectors to go after. So how does that affect black people? Debt collectors can take away some of the $1,400 coronavirus relief payments Congress approved last week as part of the American Rescue Plan. The $600 payments that Congress approved in December were protected from garnishment. That's a big thing to me that wasn't taken care of. And I believe the reason that they couldn't deal with that this time is because of the reconciliation method that they used for passage versus the traditional model they used prior. Critics say Biden's COVID relief plan breaks the promise of a $2,000 stimulus check. This is a CNBC article. But some critics of Biden's new plan, including Rep. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, say that Democrats need to fulfill their promise and provide full $2,000 payments. Democrats, including Biden, have largely backed $2,000 checks and made them the center of the recent Georgia runoff, in which the two Democratic candidates, Warnock and Ossoff, won, handing control of the Senate to the party. So they got black folks in Georgia, particularly in Atlanta, saying that we're going to give you that money in $2,000 so you can protect and provide for your family, at least in the short term, and then turned around and said, well, it's going to be $1,400. Well, we're going to lower the income level. That's not what we agreed on. 2,000 means 2,000. 2,000 does not mean 1,400, says Ocasio-Cortez. This is an older article. I believe since her position somewhat changed. I believe this is a January article. I want to take another caller. Let everybody get in here. Let me take this one. Caller, what's your name? Where you calling from?
Don't talk. It's Steve McClain. I'm calling from Cali. I'm from New York.
What's up, Steve? So what's your take?
I want to say thank you, brother, for all the great things that you and the vet are doing. It's just a travesty of what it is.
What's your take? What's your take on them moving the ball on that $2,000 stimulus? It was $2,000, then it's $1,400, and we don't get it if we make $82,000. What's your take on them moving the ball on this stimulus?
Oh, well, it's the bait and switch, which is what we're always susceptible to because we don't have any wealth. And so that's exactly what it is, a bait and switch to get what you want. And that's why whenever we have to vote or have to go in on people, we need to know exactly who that's necessarily working for us and who's not working against us. And there are too many black folks who are in politics that are working against us and not for us, and we have to get them out of the office. That's just the bottom line.
I agree. You were on hold for quite a bit of time. What did you want to speak on particularly? Floor is open.
I just want to say that with the Indians, and this is, it's amazing that we have Joe Biden, who says that we can't get reparations unless we talk to Indians. He has the most access to the most information. Do you believe he knows that Indians used to have ADOS as slaves?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I believe everybody knows,
so
except for us. Except for ADOS. I just think that, when I say ADOS, I'm not talking about the freedmen. I'm talking about outside of the freedmen. I just believe the way that we've moved is just so kind of like just get along. It's the get along politics, and like as a result, we're not really informed. So we view Native Americans as the way that it shows in the book. There was slavery, and then there was genocide of the Native Americans. But we don't dig into like what happened after that genocide. We don't dig into and understand. I'm of the ilk, even if they hadn't actually stood up for us. If it was like one or two of them that had slaves, I don't believe that you should take that and extrapolate. We're talking about 15 and 20% of their tribe. Then now, even today, they have a Jim Crow type system, and in addition, while using that Jim Crow system to actually omit the blacks, the freedmen from services, they're using their raw numbers to actually get monies. Understand what they're doing though. That is theft today though. So each of those persons are actually, that money is supposed to go to that person. That's why the government gives it to you. So the government gives it to the state. You're there. You're going to get some access to the privileges and the benefits because you pay taxes. What's happening here is that the freedmen are actually invisible people. So they count for the numbers' sake of actually getting aid for the tribe. But then when they go to access healthcare, they don't count for themselves. I mean, think about that. After coming from slavery.
Well, Tone, I want to tell you thank you, brother, because I didn't even know that they had their own form of Jim Crow. And what you just probably spit, a lot of people just learned just now. Like, I had no idea that they had this set in place. So once again, thank you for all your hard work, man. It is greatly appreciated, as well as Yvette. And yo, man, keep banging, man. We behind you all the way, man. So keep doing your thing. Appreciate you,
man.
Peace.
Man, I love the great callers, and I thank you for calling. I want to slow this down because I want to actually read something to you. Jim Crow defined a practice or policy of segregating or discriminating against black people, as in public places, public vehicles, or employment. How is that not a form of Jim Crow? What we just read earlier. We can't just. It's not about whether white people do it, and then all of a sudden it's Jim Crow. This is still Jim Crow, and it's basically because they have their own like tribes. It's kind of allowed on this land that doesn't have to follow all of the laws of America. But what we can do is make the money contingent on them not having those rules, because we don't actually advocate for them, particularly when we know that they had slaves. These are not black people that moved into those territories separate and apart afterwards or something like that. These are black people that were slaves. I have no idea how the CBC, NAACP, everybody has never dealt with this. But ADOS is on the watch. So we see the coronavirus bill is a heavy lift for already strained IRS. So a lot of this bill comes through the payments. They expect the IRS to really be functional. I filed my taxes. My 2020 I did with TurboTax. But my 2019 I did it by hand myself. Sit down, do the taxes, everything. When I looked online, they had cashed the payment that I made. Are we supposed to believe that an IRS that already is in chaos is supposed to disperse this? It really should be done at the state level. The problem is that the states, they get the money and do what they want to with it. So they're going to give this money through tax credits. They're going to give this money through these stipend payments. They're going to give this money through the IRS. But the IRS, again, I was telling you, essentially, I filed my 19 taxes written, and they still haven't even processed them, but they did take the payment, so they got the taxes. There's a lot of people like that. Millions of people that are out there that they ain't filed, they didn't get their refund from 19 because of coronavirus and the staffing that went down. I filed my 20 taxes digitally, and they actually got it immediately. And I think for a lot of people that's hard, because also you can't file taxes before this year, like prior to 2020, digitally. You can only file them written. So they're asking an IRS that's already strained to actually handle this thing, and I don't see how that works. Coronavirus relief bill is a heavy lift for already strained IRS. This is the article. The Biden administration says the first of the $1,400 direct payments, part of the big coronavirus relief package signed on Thursday, will set to go out to the eligible Americans over the weekend. The Internal Revenue Service has the job of implementing the measures, and they've had a rough decade or so. Budgets were slashed. There was a hiring freeze and a loss of workers. Still, the work keeps coming. Keeps coming. Tony Reardon, president of the National Treasury, Employment's Union, which represents many IRS workers, it makes it very difficult for the agency to do its tax work when they've lost more than 20% of their workforce. Then a year ago, the coronavirus pandemic hit. Some IRS offices temporarily closed. The filing deadline for 2019 taxes was extended to July, and the IRS is still behind in processing those returns. That's what I was telling you earlier. And now with the 2020 filing season underway, the agency has new responsibility. It needs to issue the latest stimulus payments to some 85% American households, according to President Biden, and implement other provisions as well. So understand that if your taxes ain't filed, how they gonna give you your stimulus if your money changed? If your how does this work? Because it's all based on the taxes. Maybe I'm not making sense here. Let's take another caller. Caller, what's your name? Where are you calling from? Hello?
Joe.
Hey, what's up? Let me read this to you. The IRS cashed her check, then the late notices started coming. Kathy Brenneman, had filed an amendment to her 2018 taxes via snail mail, meaning regular mail, along with a $108 check to pay the balance due in early March 2020 when the virus that causes COVID-19 was first spreading. A few weeks later, as the nation went into lockdown, Congress tasked the IRS with delivering $270 billion in economic payments. As the agency struggled to administer the unprecedented program during a pandemic, Brenneman's tiny tax payment may have gotten lost. Her check was cashed. She got an IRS notice that she dated from April saying that she owed them money. So basically, they didn't process the taxes. So they're running this through the taxes, and the IRS is in a mess. I don't see how this all is going to work smoothly, let alone even roughly. And I'm just trying to understand how this is going to impact black folks. Give me your take on the whole $1.9 trillion bill and the taxes, particularly if you have any.
Man, the 1.9 trillion, I never thought we was going to see more than 1% of it anyway. I personally just believe, as a disenfranchised people, we should have made our demands before election day. But that's spilled milk, so we ain't gonna cry about that. But moving forward, I would say that we should be negotiating with anybody that's in power. And because personally, I don't see any difference in these two, and the two candidates, Trump and.
Well, they're not candidates anymore. Biden. They're not candidates anymore. Biden's the president.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's
right.
I'm just saying like there's not two sides no more. It's just the Democrats. They running this now for the next 4 years.
No, you're right. You're right. I'm just saying, in retrospect, when they were both candidates for 2020, it seemed to me like we should have just made some clear demands. But I lost a lot of friends just saying that we need to get whatever we're going to get from both parties because they're complicit. And they've been complicit throughout our history here. So I really don't see them as, any difference between the two. But
let me say this to you. Let me say this to you, though. I think a lot of us, and this is the problem I said about this space, is this, I feel like this space has a lot, meaning this YouTube space, a lot of people that don't know about politics and don't know what the hell they're talking about. Not you. I'm talking about people that are teaching people. They're vastly different. I need people to understand. I'm trying to get Yvette to do this book next, the Democracy and Change book. But what we have to understand is that the Republican Party has been basically eaten alive by the libertarians. And the libertarians don't believe in giving anybody anything. So it's easy to say that there's no difference between the two parties if you don't really understand what the two parties are. I'm not dealing with the Democrats right now. I understand we have neoliberals. I understand that you don't have enough progressive identity agendas. I understand they elected Biden. But you first have to deal with the fact the other side isn't an other side at this point. We have to force that other side to be something other than what it is right now. That's different. That's a long play. But in the short term, those libertarians, basically like the Koch brothers, people like that, they don't believe that anybody should get any service. So you can't go to them and say, I want a lot of service. Now, what used to be is there was a different Republican Party. That's for another day, another discussion. And that's pulling that party more centered. But I'm saying, as it is, I think that we created a narrative out of the Republican Party that left out the libertarian model of just like, we don't believe anybody should get anything from government, period. It's not just being conservative. They're beyond that.
Well, I would say they're not exactly the same, but at the end of the day, they do
Yeah, that's
Joe Biden
okay.
was
That's true. That's true. But I'm just saying. But I'm saying to you in terms of this $1.9 trillion bill, we didn't have a Republican and a Democrat at our conference, and we had the guy that sponsored this bill. And what we should have done, going to your point, is basically showed up and screamed, "We demanding what Native Americans are getting. We're demanding to be recognized." We that was the avenue, in my view. I totally understand that we want to believe in a two-party system, and we should have one. I argue we should have more than two parties. But as it is right now, them Koch brothers and the politics of big business, particularly on the, you call it the right, but that libertarian model, we need to learn more about what that means and what they stand for, because I think we don't really grasp. They stand for you don't exist. So you can go talk to somebody that say you don't exist and say I do exist, but if they are saying you don't exist, you have to understand that ain't really a good negotiation tool to go with the other side and say, well, I'll go to that side instead.
No, I wouldn't want to choose either side. I look at us as what we are, disenfranchised under this government, which Democrats and Republicans were complicit. So I look at both of them as two sides of the same coin. Not necessarily the same, but they work together. And this $1,400 is an insult. And for like you said, for them to cut it down, the criteria for it to be, you got to make less than $75,000. But obviously, everybody made less than that last year, but they're going to base it on the previous year. So that's basically just a slap in the face, especially the ADOS. So I'm feeling like while down ballot was actually the intentions and everything that it was intended to do, I think that they still got some support from us that they didn't deserve. And I guess we had a terrible alternative, obviously, in the other candidate, but looking at the circumstances, it seems like we got a lot of what we were anticipating we were going to get from the other guy, from the guy that we actually voted for. So I'm just really despondent about continuing supporting them before we get what we want. I think we should get what we need, make our demands before the election day, get what we need before that, and who's ever working on that and who's already given us something in good faith before we vote, then they can have the vote. Because to me, I don't see us getting anything from either one of them right now.
No, I appreciate.
So that's just where I'm at right now. I feel like we need to make some clear demands, and I mean, I think the demands were clear, but they weren't met, or it didn't even seem like anybody had any intentions of meeting them. They were pretty much telling us, "Don't ask for anything until after the election," and I just thought that was a flawed strategy on our part.
Yeah, man. I'm gonna answer offline because I got a couple more callers. Let me say this, because shout out to Nigel Ados. Let me say this. He said small government, therefore small government. I don't think that's what's going on. I don't know if I can make it any clearer. That's why I said we need to. I hope the next book club does this. Therefore, no government. It's a difference between the traditional conservative that's for small government and for a libertarian that moves to the point of being for no government. You don't speak to somebody for no government about reparations. I don't know how to explain that any better, because we've been basically having people who go on Fox and news and ramble and say this, and we don't really understand politics at this point. And it should be two wings. Actually, I believe it should be more than two wings. It should be multiple wings. But that's not the America we're in. What I will say is, when you brought John Yarmouth, who's the head of the budgets, to your actual convention, you got the floor, and he tells you you just need to be louder. You got the floor. The question is, did you do that work individually? When we look around ADOS, are you really advocating for your family? Are you just talking on the internet, typing, or on one of these little forum boards, typing about what we can do? We brought the guy, put him in front of you. He told you what you need to do. What was your put in? What did you do in the last 12 months virtually? You didn't even have to physically go. What organizations did you join? What groups did you actually push forward? Or did you just watch the BET Awards and then tune into this a little bit, tune into that a little bit? You can't then say you want politics. I'm just saying. Shout out to my mods and to my ADOS chapter leaders that come to the meetings every 2 weeks that we do. That are shout out to Yvette Carnell and Serena and Princess and everybody else. And I'm sorry if I'm leaving anybody out that are doing day-to-day work to try to put together a genuine politics. But we put John Yarmouth in front of you, and he was the co-sponsor on that bill, and we had the ability to make a demand. And y'all wanted all kind of other stuff, from cultural conventions to NAACP galas. Just telling you the truth. So we're coming to the end of the show. We got the tax credit that we talked about it, the child tax credit, $3,600. Again, it was $2,000 and went up to $3,600 for the kids from 0 to 6. Then after 6 to 17, it's only $3,000. So it's $1,000 more or $1,600 more. But then they making you have the kids at home, and they ain't telling you the whole truth of how much it costs to have a kid at home. Because when your kid's at home, he gonna eat all day. And I'm not saying it's wrong, but like, he gonna eat all day. Just that. You gotta have the real internet, because you can't have that slow internet and do Zoom. You gotta be at home too, because you hybrid from work as well. You got 2 kids, so you 2 kids plus the husband. So 4 of y'all gotta be on the internet. You gotta monitor your kid, because he be on the video games when he's supposed to be at school, but you at work too. But all they gave you was $1,600 more if you had a baby. But you don't have a baby. You got a 12-year-old, so they only gave you $1,000 more. But they told you that they just saved everything and gave you a minimum amount of wealth and everything else. I need us to understand, none of this $1.9 trillion is really targeted at ADOS Black Americans in the way that it should be. In a similar way that we saw that they could do it. They did it with Native Americans. Part of what we're trying to do on ADOS101.com, on ADOS HQ, is push that demand. Start breaking down when we see these budgets. Demand more so that your family can survive and move forward. This is Tone Talks. Please go to tonetalks.org to subscribe or donate. Share this video. Keep this discussion going, because if you don't have it here, you ain't going to have it nowhere else. Thank you.